Tribunal's impeachment verdict on Yoon Suk-yeol. 25 killed in Israeli airstrike on school in Gaza. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. I'm Othman and you're watching World Today. Now, South Korea's Constitutional Court, in a historic ruling today, upheld a decision to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol for imposing martial law on 3rd December. He became the second Korean leader to be impeached by the court after Park Geun-hye in 2017. Yoon was ousted from office the moment the verdict was decided. The Constitutional Court justices began reading the verdict around 11 a.m. At 11:22 a.m., the Constitutional Court upheld Yoon's impeachment in a unanimous vote. The 8 Constitutional Court justices reached a verdict 111 days after the National Assembly, which is controlled by the Liberal Democratic Party, voted to impeach Yoon for declaring a martial law. However, the court said that Yoon's martial law declaration did not meet the legal requirement to constitute a national crisis. An election to choose his successor would also take place within 60 days. Yoon, 64, was impeached by lawmakers on 14th December last year over his attempt to subvert civilian rule, which saw armed soldiers deployed to parliament. He was also arrested over a separate criminal trial on insurrection charges. After weeks of tense hearings, judges spent more than a month deliberating the case while public unrest was swelled. Yoon still commands the backing of extreme supporters who have staged protests for weeks in the run-up to the verdict. The wait for his ruling had led to worsening political divisions in the country and the emergence of unverified conspiracy theories, some suggesting that the justices were locked in intense disagreements. Police have been increasing security and plan to deploy maximum capacity today to head off unrest. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency said at least 25 people were killed Thursday in an Israeli airstrike on a school serving as a shelter for people displaced by the war. Agency spokesman Mahmoud Basal said the death toll had risen to 25, with more than 100 others wounded in the strike on Dar al-Arqam school in the Al-Tufah neighborhood northeast of Gaza City. The Israeli military, when contacted, did not provide an immediate response, but said in a statement that it had struck a Hamas command and control center in the area of Gaza City. Hamas condemned the attack, accusing the Israeli government of continuing its targeting of innocent civilians as part of the ongoing genocide in the Gaza Strip. Since the outbreak of the war in Gaza, tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians have sought refuge in schools and other facilities to escape the deadly violence. The Health Ministry of Gaza said on Thursday that 1,163 people have been killed since Israel resumed large-scale strikes on 18th March, bringing the overall death toll since the war began to 50,523. Now, the death of 15 medics and humanitarian workers in Gaza after shots were fired at their ambulances raises further concerns of war crimes by the Israeli military. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk calls for an independent, prompt and thorough investigation into the 23rd March incident that Israeli officials have claimed was an attack on fighters.
I'm appalled by the recent killings of 15 medical personnel and humanitarian aid workers, which raise further concerns over the commission of war crimes by the Israeli military. There must be an independent, prompt and thorough investigation into the killings, and those responsible for any violation of international law must be held to account.
The bodies of 15 rescuers and humanitarian workers, including 8 from the Palestinian Red Crescent and 1 from the UN, were found near Rafah in what the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs called a mass grave. United Nations Aid Chief Tom Fletcher will arrive in earthquake-devastated Myanmar on Friday, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres announced as he appealed for more international funding and rapid, unimpeded access in the country. Guterres said his special envoy for Myanmar, Julie Bishop, will also travel to the country in the coming days to reinforce commitment to peace and dialogue.
Myanmar today is the scene of utter devastation and desperation. The death toll is now 3,000 and climbing, with thousands injured and many trapped under the rubble. This disaster has laid bare the deeper vulnerabilities facing people throughout the country.
Last week's 7.7 magnitude quake jolted the region home to 28 million, toppling buildings such as hospitals, flattening communities, and leaving many without food, water, and shelter. Death rose to 3,085 on Thursday, with 4,715 injured and 341 missing. The head of Myanmar's junta was due to discuss the response to his country's devastating earthquake at a regional summit in Bangkok today, after the death toll passed 3,000. Min Aung Hlaing arrived at Bangkok Shangri-La Hotel, the summit venue, amid tight security. The junta chief will join BIMSTEC gathering representing the 7 littoral nations of the Bay of Bengal, where he will raise the emergency response to last Friday's 7.7 magnitude quake. Host country Thailand has also proposed that the leaders issue a joint statement on the impact of the disaster during the meeting. Opposition groups and rights organizations have fiercely criticized Thailand's decision to host Min Aung Hlaing, accusing him of war crimes in Myanmar's brutal conflict. His attendance at the summit represents a diplomatic win for Myanmar's isolated government as it breaks with a regional policy of not inviting junta leaders to major events. Myanmar has been engulfed in a brutal multi-sided conflict since 2021, when Min Aung Hlaing's military wrested power from the civilian government of Aung San Suu Kyi. Following protests of reports of sporadic clashes even after Friday's quake, the junta joined its opponents on Wednesday in calling a temporary halt to hostilities to allow relief to be delivered. The Syrian government and the Kurdish-led US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces conducted a prisoner swap deal in the northern city of Aleppo on Thursday. Syrian state news agency Sana reported that 250 prisoners were exchanged between the SDF and the Syrian government. Relatives and families filled the emotion waited eagerly to reunite with their loved ones, greeting them with tears and ulations. Now, the prisoners included fighters that had been detained in recent months by both sides. Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad Abdul Ghani Al-Atim said the process has not finished yet and will be completed in the coming days. He had earlier told local broadcaster Syria TV that the swap was part of a broader agreement between the SDF and Syria's government to integrate the SDF into Syria's new state institutions. The deal signed last month included a complete end of hostilities and for SDF-controlled civilian and military institutions, which include an airport, oil and gas fields, to become part of the Damascus administration. Canada to impose 25% tariff on vehicles imported from US. Stay tuned.
Kian berlabuh tirai Ramadan, lambaian Syawal makin dinanti. Luhur hati, ikhlas kemaafan, sucikan jiwa di Aidilfitri. Saya, Fahmi Fadil dan seluruh warga Kementerian Komunikasi mengucapkan Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri buat semua rakyat Malaysia. Sama-samalah kita meraihkan Hari Raya ini dengan penuh kasih sayang, kegembiraan dan keakraban bersama orang tersayang dengan menyuburkan tradisi kunjung-mengunjung antara sanak saudara dan sahabat handai. Jom, ceriakan sambutan raya anda dengan seleksi program menarik di RTM. Syukuri Syawal. Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri Maaf, zahir dan batin.
Hai, bersama-sama kami Awatar AI Berita RTM, saya Aaron Lim.
Dan saya Cik Rita. Musim perayaan ini kami ada sedikit pesanan.
Sebelum keluar dari rumah, pastikan pintu dan tingkap dikunci. Jangan lupa tutup suis dan paip air juga.
Periksa kenderaan dulu sebelum memulakan perjalanan.
Rancang perjalanan dan sentiasa berhati-hati ketika memandu. Pakai tali pinggang keledar dan elakkan penggunaan telefon bimbit.
Kalau rasa penat atau mengantuk, rehat sekejap di R&R yang disediakan. Atau berhenti di tempat yang selamat.
Pantau juga anak-anak kecil ketika berhari raya. Adik-adik, jangan main mercun. Bahaya.
Hari raya memanglah makanan sedap-sedap. Tapi makan kena beringat juga. Kurangkan makanan berlemak dan bergula.
Akhir sekali, pada hari raya ini, hargai setiap detik bersama yang tersayang.
Pesanan ikhlas daripada kami di RTM, teman setia anda. Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri. Maaf zahir dan batin. Syukuri Syawal.
Syukuri Syawal.
Canada said it would impose a 25% tariff on tens of thousands of vehicles imported from the United States, retaliating against U.S. President Donald Trump's levies that came into effect on Thursday. The Canadian tariffs will impact cars and light trucks that are made with less than 75% North American parts. Now, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced 25% tariffs on all vehicles imported from the United States that are not compliant with CUSMA or CUSMA, the U.S.-Canada-Mexico Free Trade Agreement.
Our tariffs, though, unlike the U.S. tariffs, will not affect auto parts because we know the benefits of our integrated production system. And they will also not affect vehicle content from Mexico, who is respecting the CUSMA agreement.
Canada was largely spared from the sweeping global tariffs Trump announced Wednesday, as Washington granted an exemption to goods compliant with the U.S.-Canada-Mexico Free Trade Agreement, which covers most products. However, the country is still facing tariffs on steel, aluminium, and other products, in addition to levies on automobiles. French President Emmanuel Macron called for a suspension of investment in the United States until Donald Trump's brutal and unfounded new tariffs against Europe and the rest of the world were clarified. Now, his comments followed the President Trump imposing sweeping new levies on U.S. trading partners, including a 20% tariff on imports from the European Union. Now, Macron predicted Americans will be weaker and poorer after Trump's tariff announcement, which he described as brutal and unfounded, and which would have a massive impact on the European economy. He also called on Europe to stand together in terms of their response, warning against any unilateral action. Macron reaffirmed the French government's position that a European response would come in two stages. One would come in mid-April, addressing U.S. tariffs already in place on steel and aluminium. The second would be at the end of April and would be a more massive response to the tariffs announced after a study of the sectors affected and coordination with EU member states. Direct French investments in the EU-US were worth $370 billion in 2023, making it the fifth biggest foreign investor in the country. Now, in comparison, U.S. direct investment in France the same year came to $142 billion. Now, International Monetary Fund Chief Kristalina Georgieva on Thursday said new U.S. tariffs clearly represent a significant risk to the global outlook and urged Washington to work with its trade partners. Now, the statement was first from the IMF chief after President Donald Trump's latest worldwide tariff salvo deepened a trade war that many fear will invite global recession and fuel inflation. Now, the head of the International Monetary Fund said in a statement that the tariffs clearly represent a significant risk to the global outlook at the time of sluggish growth. The Washington-based institution in January said global growth was expected to hit 3.3% this year, which is below the average global growth rate in the first 2 decades of the 21st century of 3.7%. The IMF will publish its new outlook later this month in the time for the spring meetings in Washington, in which the unprecedented U.S. trade tariff onslaught will be on the top of the agenda. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called for increased Arctic defense collaboration with the United States during a visit to the Greenland. Now, she firmly dismissed the U.S. desire to annex the semi-autonomous Danish territory. At a press conference with the outgoing and incoming Greenlandic Prime Minister, Frederiksen, which to switch to English to address the United States directly, inviting them to strengthen security in the Arctic together with Denmark and Greenland.
And so this is not only about Greenland or Denmark. This is about the world order that we have built together across the Atlantic over generations. You cannot annex another country, not even with an argument about international security.
Frederiksen's visit follows months of tension between Washington and Copenhagen over U.S. President Donald Trump's repeated declarations that the Arctic island should become part of the U.S. 9 migrants died and another 25 were rescued Thursday after their boat started sinking off the western coast of Turkey. Now, the local governor's office said the search effort is still ongoing to find 1 missing migrant. The nationalities of the migrants were not immediately known. On the same day, 7 people, including 3 children, died and 23 others were rescued when an inflatable boat carrying immigrants capsized off the Greek island of Lesbos. The boat was carrying about 30 people and capsized in mild weather a short distance from the Turkish coast. A source from the Turkish Coast Guard told AFP that the 2 accidents were unrelated. Shipwrecks were very common on the short but perilous route between the Turkish coast and the nearby Greek islands of Samos, Rhodes and Lesbos that serve as entry points to the European Union. Heavy rains in Peru have left at least 3 people dead in a landslide in the province of Chamayo in the coffee-growing Junin region of Peru, while in Puno they have caused flooding in streets and schools. In Chamayo, rescue teams found 3 bodies in a difficult-to-access area after the landslide caught workers and residents carrying out maintenance work on a road. The accident caused the workers and machinery to fall from a height of approximately 150 meters. Meanwhile, torrential rains in Puno flooded several streets, affecting educational institutions. The National Emergency Operations Center of the National Civil Defense Institute reported that more than 110,000 people have been affected by the severe weather and its aftermath since December last year. A reported tornado left behind a trail of destruction in Paducah, Kentucky on Thursday, with Governor Andy Beshear warning of further fierce weather ahead. Local authorities also reported that damage in Jefferson County, Kentucky, was also a result of a tornado, with no fatalities have been reported so far. Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee declared a state of emergency on Wednesday. The National Weather Service warned on Thursday of generational floods in the U.S. South and Midwest as storms rip across swaths of the county from Texas to Michigan, whipping up tornadoes and killing 2 people. At least 19 tornadoes struck on Wednesday, destroying homes and businesses, injuring at least 8 people and knocking out power to thousands or hundreds of thousands. Meanwhile, in drones recorded widespread destruction in a northern Arkansas city on Thursday. A Craighead County sheriff confirmed Thursday that at least 8 people were injured and 57 structures were damaged as a result of the Wednesday night storms. The National Weather Service Arkansas Storm Team predicts more severe weather on Thursday, with the potential for more tornadoes in the state. supports UEFA to allow Russia back only if war on Ukraine stops. Stay with us.
Membakar semangat juang dua pasukan. Pemburuan tahta terulung bakal dimuktamadkan dengan pertembungan dua gergasi. Harimau Selatan kini bersedia merempuh pertahanan kebal skuad Tok Gajah. Nantikan penentuannya dalam siaran langsung perlawanan akhir Piala Malaysia 2024-2025 Sabtu 26 April Johor Darul Takzim bertemu Sri Pahang FC 8 malam di saluran OK dan saluran Sukan RTM, juga penstreaman langsung di RTM Click.
The United Kingdom appears set to host the 2035 Women's World Cup after FIFA President Gianni Infantino described its interest as the one valid bid for the tournament. FIFA President Gianni Infantino said the governing body is currently plans to confirm the Women's World Cup host for 2031 and 2035 at the 76th FIFA Congress in the second quarter of next year. The United States, with the possibility of other countries in CONCACAF region joining the U.S., is also poised to be named host of the 2031 Women's World Cup as the only bid. Reports had suggested Spain, Portugal and Morocco, who are jointly hosting the 2030 Men's World Cup, plan to launch a rival bid for 2035 before Infantino's comment on Thursday that the UK's was the only valid bid. Infantino also confirmed that FIFA intends to increase the number of participating teams at the 2031 Women's World Cup to 48 countries, to equal the men's game. Brazil will host the 2027 event, which will feature 32 teams. Meanwhile, a request from FIFA to increase the number of women's teams at the Olympics from 12 to 16 has been rejected by the International Olympic Committee. If the impasse cannot be resolved, the FIFA president said World Football's governing body plans to decrease the number of men's teams to allow more women's teams at the Olympics. UEFA President Alexander Ceferin has been clear that the war in Ukraine must stop before the governing body of European football will consider ending the ban on Russian teams. Now, in 2022, FIFA and UEFA announced that Russian teams would be excluded from their events until further notice following the country's invasion of Ukraine. Ceferin, speaking at UEFA's annual Congress on Thursday, said that the decision to expel them from competition was a joint one, and any change would take place following conversations with the world governing body.
About the readmission of Russian teams, I said that many times and I can repeat it, and if I repeat it, you will still have your doubts. When the war stops, they will be readmitted. The first decision was done together with FIFA, and as much as we discuss with FIFA, I think we will do it. We'll do it together when we do it.
At a meeting in Belgrade, Serbia, UEFA's council voted for the new members of its executive committee, of which 5 will represent Europe on FIFA's council. Earlier on Thursday, FIFA President Gianni Infantino had announced he would consider a proposal to expand the 2030 World Cup to a 64-nation format. Ceferin told reporters he had been surprised by the news of the proposal and that the thought of it was a bad idea that would not have UEFA's support. Arsenal defender Gabriel will sit out the rest of the season after undergoing a surgery on his hamstring in what will be a major blow to Mikel Arteta's side. Now, Gabriel went down injured in the early stages of Arsenal's 2-1 win over Fulham on Tuesday and was substituted immediately. Arsenal, in a statement, said Gabriel will undergo a surgical repair procedure to his hamstring in the coming days and immediately begin his recovery and rehabilitation program. The aim was for Gabriel to be ready and fit to play at the start of next season. Arsenal were ready without defenders Ricardo Calafiori, Ben White and Takehiro Tomiyasu, while Juren Timber also came off with a knee issue. Arsenal are 12 points behind Liverpool in the Premier League title race, while they host Real Madrid in the first leg of the Champions League quarter-finals next week. In golf, Kiara Romero of the United States shot 4 under at the Augusta National Women's Amateur on Thursday to climb up the leaderboard, where she is tied with reigning champion Lottie Ward in first place after 2 days. Now, Ward hit 2 under par on Thursday, with the pair tied at 135 apiece after 2 days. Megha Ghani, who had led the pack with a 2-shot lead overnight, struggled to keep up the pace on Thursday. The American, a slow start to the day and went badly off course on the 14th, but managed to end the day a stroke over par to land in a 3-way tie for third. Andrea Revuelta, meanwhile, put in a stellar performance to end the day 6 under, enough to claw into the third place, where she sits a stroke behind the leaders, alongside Ghani and Carla Bernetta Escuder, who are all on 136. The top 30 players after Thursday's second round move on to Saturday's final at Augusta National.
In 2025, Malaysia proudly leads the ASEAN community into a new era of unity, growth, and opportunity. Together with 10 Southeast Asian nations, Malaysia is driving progress in trade, innovation, sustainability, and tourism. Explore the best of Malaysia, from its stunning landscapes to its rich cultural heritage. Be part of global events, business summits, and exciting festivals throughout the year. Join us in 2025. Discover new connections, celebrate unity, and experience the future of Southeast Asia. ASEAN Malaysia 2025. Together, we rise.
And that wraps up our bulletin this afternoon. In our top story, court upholds impeachment verdict on Yoon Suk-yeol, formally removing him from office. Now, do join us again tonight at 8:30 p.m. for more news on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM. Or you can stream us online on RTM Click's website and mobile app. Until then, I'm Otto Othman. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Have a pleasant day ahead.